One concept I want to break down when it comes to sociosexual dynamics is the outsourcing game. Now, something to understand is this, right? Relationships have several different levels of compatibility. Several different levels. You have the sexual and you have the non-sexual, right? But then you also have to understand cup theory. And something to understand along the way is this. An abundance mindset is going to be predicated upon either your ability to self-soothe and, well, I'll say it like this. This is a better way of putting it, right? Needs in a relationship are going to be met in one of three sources: you, your partner, or someone else. You, your partner, or someone else. Now, what the outsourcing game is really predicated upon is areas where you compartmentalize and outsource one need that you have so that you can more easily maintain a relationship dynamic that you have that is working well on the other levels of that relationship dynamic with another person. Now, one thing to understand about the outsourcing game is that for the outsourcing game to work, right, it's typically a situation where one person's needs are going to be fully met between their partner and themselves, and then the partner is going to have one or more need that is unmet. And because the partner whose needs are fully met is able to accept that, the partner whose needs aren't met, they're able to outsource that to elsewhere. Now, the outsourcing game is something that helps keep relationships alive. But another thing to understand when it comes to the outsourcing game is that if you do not compartmentalize what you're outsourcing, then you stand the chance of simply being mate poached, right? There's a difference between outsourcing and becoming mate poached, right? Or monkey branching, right? There's a difference between outsourcing and monkey branching. You got to know that there's a difference. Monkey branching may be a situation where you're unsatisfied with your partner, right? So that everybody that you come across is pretty much auditioning to take their position, right? That's monkey branching. So that's like, let's say a woman is dealing with a guy and he doesn't give her enough attention, right? Now, if she gets a beta male orbiter, then she's outsourcing her desire for validation. Now, what outsourcing this desire for attention does is it puts her in a position where she has more energy and more in her cup, so that it is easier for her to be able to be feminine and submissive with her man. What outsourcing does is it makes it easier for you to operate out of an abundance mindset with your primary partner. Let's say a man is dealing with a woman who can't meet his full sex drive, right? Or the sexual compatibility is good in spurts, but it's not something that's fully consistent. But let's say that the woman is very good long-term material, and this woman is not only very good long-term material, but they get along non-sexually. He trusts the woman, and in his trusting the woman, he also understands that if he were to put too much pressure on her to meet his sexual needs, that it would burn her out. But he also understands that if he does not sleep with other people, then what will happen along the way is that he will get burnt out. So instead of trying to make those two things converge on the spot, you may take time to deal with that woman, somewhat based more so on her desire level, while you're also working on growing that. Now, the truth of outsourcing is this. In order for outsourcing to work, the person who is being outsourced to has to take a feminine submissive stance. They got to take the feminine submissive, right? And that's just like a man who's in the friend zone, or a woman who is in the sex zone, a woman who is not getting too much higher than a fuck buddy or maybe even a friends with benefits. That's the side piece, right? Now, if his ego gets too overly into this woman, then he may shift his attention and shift his focus away from his primary partner into who he's outsourcing to. Now, I'm talking about doing this in a way that is honest. I'm talking about doing this in a way where you're not lying to the individual about it, right? But something else that can happen is this. If resentment builds up, and either way it can create an issue, If someone leaves out of the feminine submissive stance and you've become too attached to the individual, or they hit you with a bait and switch, then for a short period of time, your attention may shift to wanting to chase behind the person who you were using for outsourcing. Right? And this is why it takes a lot of self-control and emotional discipline to do the outsourcing game. Right? And when you're working on that process of integration, it's very important to understand how to compartmentalize and how to separate sex from emotions, unless you make a choice to do that. So a woman may be in a position where she has a man who's outsourcing, but she doesn't outsource. The thing about utilizing the outsourcing game is that you have to have the capacity of meeting your partner's needs on your own. Right? If you do not have the capacity to meet their needs on your own, then you're pretty much taking food out of their mouth in order to deal with someone else. And that will lead to feelings of resentment and feelings of neglect. And those feelings of neglect will cause them to desire to outsource as well. And we also have to understand what it means to be monogamy oriented, right? Like in my definition of monogamy oriented is different than others. Many people may say it doesn't exist at all, or others will say that somebody's a good girl or they're promiscuous. That's not necessarily true. Being monogamy oriented is basically just about, let's say it's a woman. If she's experiencing the best sex that she's had, or great sex, or sex and emotions mix, the moment the sex and emotions mix, she starts losing the interest to pursue or to allow men to pursue her in a way where sex can happen. May not go away completely. She's not going to just stop being attracted to other men on the spot. It doesn't work like that. It does not work like that. But how it does work is this. Let's say she's in a relationship with a man, or she's talking to a man and they start having sex, and when the sex and emotions mix for her, that just becomes it. That becomes her guy. For someone who's monogamy oriented, outsourcing is not necessarily going to work. The person that you're dealing with has to have competence, and then you also have to have a high ability to self-soothe. Because if you don't have a high ability to self-soothe, and you're dealing with somebody who is utilizing the outsourcing game, then you will try to take the same liberties that they take in the way that you attempt to outsource as well. But for you, it's going to turn more so into monkey branching, right? Now, for someone who is not monogamy oriented, it's not really going to have the same effect. Like, let's say a man and a woman are in a relationship, or they're married. They've been married for a long time. Let's say the man is getting up in age. Let's say they're both in their 40s. The man, his sex drive, his testosterone may be going lower. He may be having blood pressure issues that lead to erectile dysfunction. So she gets a younger man who she's sleeping with, and this makes it easier for her to be feminine submissive with her man, but she still gets to get some young D that gives her a good time, but she knows how to compartmentalize that only into the sexual aspect, right? Another aspect of it, let's say a man is dealing with a woman, they have their sexual relationship together, they have a life that they're building together, but let's say that this woman isn't the deepest when it comes to the types of conversations that they have in their common interests, right? So he may outsource by having a woman who he communicates with, or a friend, because if it's a non-sexual thing, then it's not so much about a sexual connection. So he may just have male friends who he talks to so that he's able to have that type of mental connection, right? And it's safe to do that with people who you aren't attracted to in that way. Now, it's a race against the clock, right? One, when you're outsourcing, typically you're going to have to keep switching around the people that you're dealing with. And ultimately, if a monogamous relationship is something you do desire, then it may be a situation where you're going to eventually have to put up or shut up. Like, eventually, it's going to be a situation where you either let the woman go that you're dealing with, or she's going to let you go, right? Or you make a gradual progression through your program into a monkey branch. And I don't know if I consider that completely a monkey branch, because when you have a program, it takes time to establish the level of compatibility that you see over time that lets you know that a relationship can work. But typically, if you're outsourcing, sex as a man, the woman that you're dealing with, who's your primary partner non-sexually, is a woman who is so on point, who knows you so well over time that even if a woman is on your program, she's probably not going to be performing consistently over time as well as your primary woman. So that's one thing. So it's like her position is not really in jeopardy. But in order to utilize the outsourcing game, you have to understand a few concepts, right? The right of first refusal, which means that if there's something sexual that you want to engage in that you haven't done with your partner before, they need to have the choice of being able to do that first, right? Tenure. What tenure means is that when it comes to energy that you pour out, as far as investments that you make, that the one who is in your life primarily, your primary partner, they get tenure, which means that they may make mistakes here and there. You know, they're not going to be perfect. Nobody's going to be perfect. But because of their tenure with you, it's just like an adjunct professor versus a tenured professor, then now they have an office. Now they have a space. Now there's a certain level of access that you allot to them, a certain amount of investment that you allot to them. And you do not make an investment in someone else in a way that takes food out of your primary partner's mouth. Right? And this is where things like vetoes come in when it comes to like polyamorous relationships, right? But what we also have to understand is that there's a difference between engaging in different variations of non-monogamous situations from a place of abundance with a partner who is integrated with you, to where if you have to go extended periods of time, like let's say you're trying to have a baby, or let's say you're going through issues in your relationship and you need to shut things down for a little while to make sure that everything stays copacetic and good, that you can do that without it being an issue, right? If you can be fully sexually compatible and you prefer your partner, and the sexual and the non-sexual, the shit's working good, but you two are just both people who like sexual variety. If you're both people who like sexual variety, then you may engage in a little bit of unicorn hunting. You may engage in a little bit of, you may be swingers, right? But if push comes to shove, you could be happy with just you two together. You could be happy with just that. That's different than outsourcing, because outsourcing does come from a need that isn't fully being met. I remember one of the most savage things I ever heard from this one guy was he had a girl that he was dealing with, right? That was his woman. She just had his baby. And he was telling me about these girls he was talking to, dealing with. And I was like, I thought you was in a relationship. He said, you know, I'm single until them stitches heal. And that shit was wild to me, you know, but some niggas can get down like that. There's certain things that I can do a lot of men can't get away with, because I'm very honest with women, and also I make sure I'm competent, like to the extent of the needs of the woman. And it takes trust. I'll say this, it takes trust to do the outsourcing game, because you have to trust that your partner genuinely just has a low cup, or they have an inability to meet certain needs that you have, and not that they just don't feel that way about you specifically. And that's something that takes extremely high level of trust that's built over time. You don't give someone you just met the type of pass to be outsourcing with someone you just met, right? So something that can come with outsourcing game is kind of a built-in Madonna whore complex at times. And that's part of the integration that you get over, right? Like if someone's meeting a need that your partner isn't meeting, like let's say it's sexually, then you may view this person as only sex material and your primary partner as more so non-sexually important. And that can lead to a point where if you don't watch yourself, that's why I use the concept of the right of first refusal when it comes to principles you need to hold to if you're utilizing the outsourcing game. Another thing is this. If you come from a background of traditionalism, right, then a woman having a job where she goes and works for another man, instead of being able to be in a position where you have a job or a career for her, or she has her own business, then she's really outsourcing, right? So let's say this, if a woman has her own hustle, then that would be considered self-soothing, right? And we got to understand the hierarchy of pleasure, right? And the hierarchy of needs. So if she has her own hustle, right, where she is an entrepreneur, then she's self-soothing on her financial needs, right? If she has a job or has, simps or tricks or sugar daddies. She has dudes who come and just spend money on her just to do it. Then that would be outsourcing non-sexually with the money, right? But if you're the one who's providing for her, or she is being provided through working for a career or working a family business, then that would be taking care of things in-house. It's taking care of things in-house, right? So it's different levels to this outsourcing, different levels to it. Like, let's say, because like something I said earlier, right? There's a difference between monkey branching and outsourcing. Like, let's say you're out to sea, or let's say you're in prison. And while you're in prison, your woman may have a guy she's just having sex with, or that she knows she never wants anything more than just casual sex with him while you're in prison, right? Or while you're out at sea in the Navy, or while you're overseas in the military, right? And maybe she's back at home. I don't think it's realistic to expect your woman to be 100% sexually faithful if you're spending years in prison. If she's putting money on your books, she's down for you, she's taking care of things at home, she's taking care of the business at home, then what she does is her business. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, if she's already to a certain point of being sexually awakened to where she craves sexuality on a consistent basis, then that's a woman where if she gets those needs, she got that itch she needs to scratch and you can't scratch it, she got to outsource it because you have an inability to do it at that moment. Because you got to understand, modern problems require modern solutions. Modern problems require modern solutions. In order to outsource, you have to compartmentalize the box that you're putting this person in that you're interacting with. You have to have the capacity to do that. And if not, it just turns into monkey branching. Right? As a man, if you're dealing with a woman and you're outsourcing sexually because you have a very high sex drive, you have a rotation or something like that, but you have your primary woman, then you can't allow yourself to get overly emotionally invested in this other woman to the point where you're taking food out of your woman's mouth, because this woman could do better than your woman can do for 3 weeks. On the 4th week, on the 2nd month, she's monkey branching herself to the next guy. You got bait and switched. She switches up on you. If you replace your primary partner who's shown over years that they were consistent with you, that they were down for you, but just that their cup was a little bit too low or they weren't able to fully tap in, then what you're doing in that particular scenario is that you're trading in a situation that probably could have been repaired, or a situation that could have worked well, for someone who is going to love bomb you. And part of the reason, and this is why you got to have that compartmentalization. This is why even if you get to the point where you got to put up or shut up within yourself and you say, you know what, if I want a primary partnership, I want it to be integrated, that if you do have women you're outsourcing with, that they still have to go through the vetting process. And this is one reason why it benefits to have a vetting process that takes time. And typically outsourcing is going to come from a foundation of a prematurely integrated relationship, because you are invested in someone who isn't and doesn't have the capacity to meet your needs in that moment. It's better if you're doing that with someone who's shown the capacity, still show that they were loyal to you in the ways that are important to you, but that they're unable to right now. Like, let's say you're dealing with a woman, you were very sexually compatible, you're non-sexually compatible, she invests in you financially, she supports your dreams, your vision, your family loves her, but let's say she's going through depression, and while she's taking antidepressants, it completely kills her sex drive. Let's say you're dealing with a woman and she's going through postpartum depression, and that completely kills her sex drive. Now, if you do not outsource, eventually that's going to lead to resentment towards her. You can love her, be there for her, but if you don't have the ability to self-soothe on a certain level, then it's going to lead to resentment. Then your cup's going to get low, and then it's going to become two people with a low cup, and that's going to turn into a toxic relationship. Right? Another thing to understand when it comes to the hierarchy of sexual desires and sexual needs and preferences, right? There's, like I said, it's you, your partner, or someone outside of the relationship. So let's say you're having sex with a woman who she desires to have sex with you first and foremost, and then her secondary is masturbation. right? And look at it like this. Look at it like instinctual variance within. Look at it like instinctual variance within the Enneagram. You have social, sexual, self-preservation. So let's say she desires you first sexually, then it would be the idea of just masturbation, which is self-soothing. And then beyond that, like below that, would be having sex with somebody outside of the relationship. And that would be at the bottom of her list. All right, that's best case scenario, right? But it may be a situation where at the top of the list may be masturbation. I don't think that's always the best situation, because if at the top of the list is masturbation, then it may be a matter of she hasn't come in contact with someone who could give her a greater level of pleasure than she can give herself. So you're not really in the dominant position. So in that type of situation, she may just be in a very low cup space. But at the same time, let's say it's masturbation, then you, then someone else. You might be able to work with that, but I think that's often a risky thing, but those things can shift with time, right? But then you also have the instance where you're at the bottom of the list. That's different, right? Let's say at the top of the list is another man. Then below that is masturbation. Then below that is you. Then pretty much you're getting cuckolded, right? Or if she's highly sexual and it's the actual sexual connection that she enjoys, then at the top of the list may be someone else. Then below that may be you. Then at the bottom may be masturbation, right? And if that's how it works, or if it's you, then someone else, then masturbation, and masturbation is at the bottom of the list, then that's where a woman may outsource sexually. Now, as long as you're at the top of the list, and you can't 100% know that, but I'm just speaking from a perspective of someone you trust enough to say that they're being honest, or that you can observe these things. And in that type of situation, it's like, okay, cool, right? Cool. She's fucking with you. She just doesn't have a super high sex drive because her cup is low right now. So sexual desire is one of the first things to go. But if you're not available, then masturbation is not going to be enough to meet that need. Now, likewise, a man can say, okay, cool. My wife, she's not horny tonight, so I'm just going to masturbate. Then you may not be someone who needs to outsource because of the hierarchy of your needs. Right? If you like masturbation more than you like having sex with your woman, then it may be a situation where eventually, you might get that porn addiction and then start neglecting your own woman sexually. And I've seen that happen. And that's not a pretty sight to see when that type of thing takes place. So you got to think about that hierarchy of needs, the hierarchy of pleasure, right? So this is Coach Brody on Outsourcing, the outsourcing game. I'm out.